All right, we're about to get started, so settle down, get yourself a drink, and get ready to geek out on Microsoft Azure NetApp Files. I am Phoebe Go, and as you can see, we now have video. So this is the first time we're trying this new format. And so please excuse us as we work our way through this new technology. And I would like to welcome our guests today, as you see them on the other video screen. Just a quick question, just a quick couple of admin points. We will be going for about 45 minutes. If you have any questions, please throw them into the Q&A or the chat box, and we will try and get to them through the session. And if not, we will answer your questions afterwards via email. All the best questions will get some good swag, so please do ask questions as you think of them. And yes, like I said, we'll run for about 45 minutes with some time to get through those questions at the end. So our three guests today are sitting in the Sydney office. I am sitting in a virtual Sydney office, and I would like to introduce them to you. So Chris, who are you? What's your name? What do you do, and how do people contact you?
Thanks, Phoebe. So yes, Chris Gassessa, I'm the Solutions Engineering Manager here in the Sydney office, looking after our Enterprise North space and trying to herd a bunch of solutions engineering cats around, looking after our customers. To get in contact with me, LinkedIn's the best way, a unique name of Chris Gassessa, so G-A-C-E-S-A. Thanks, Phoebe.
And in the middle, Arun Wadvani. What do you do, and how do people get in touch?
Good morning, everybody. You've got Arun Wadvani. I'm the sales lead here for Azure NetApp Files. And basically, I'm here today to work with Chris and Mark to take you across Azure NetApp Files. Best way to contact me, of course, is through LinkedIn, just like Chris. Alternatively, you can email me through at anzinfo@netapp.com. Thank you.
Awesome. And last but not least, Mark.
Hey everybody, so I'm Mark Keane from Microsoft, even though it's got a NetApp logo down there on the little name tag, but we're all part of one family now. So I work with the Azure Infrastructure Technical Department, so part of the sales team at Microsoft and helping people make sense of the cloud and helping people move to the cloud with Azure and also with Azure NetApp Files as well. And if you want to contact me, it's quite simple. You put a dot in between the name and put @microsoft.com on the end of it.
So that's marc.kean @microsoft.com, right? So we invited Mark to join us today to talk about a really exciting new Azure service, Azure NetApp Files. So Mark, do you want to talk us through it or show us even better?
Yeah. Do you want to go through the first bit? Okay, we'll go straight into a demo.
Yeah, that'd be good.
All right, let's go straight into a demo.
The best way to live demos. We're not scared.
All right, you guys can see the Azure Portal on the screen.
Yep.
So we've got Azure NetApp Files, and we're based in Australia East. So what we can do is, let's get straight into it. So Azure NetApp Files, right now you still have to be whitelisted to get into it. Everything is available in region. So you just simply go add and put in the name of the Azure NetApp account. So this is the account for Azure NetApp Files, which is an account per region. So we put in an account for today. So demo account, something nice and simple. Put your subscription in, and then your resource group. So you pick a resource group within Azure, and that's just a logical container of where you put your applications. So normally what you do is you run resource group, is you put all your like-minded applications together into one, so you can permission that off and give people access to it. So what we'll do, we'll create a new one here, call it demo Azure NetApp Files.
And you can put all sorts of resources into a resource group, right? Not just Azure NetApp Files, but VMs and networks and IPs and all that sort of thing.
Everything that's sort of like part of the whole distributed application. It's probably good for like a team. Think of like an SAP enterprise application, for example, and then all the bits that make that tick as all separate resources, put that into one resource group, and that team that have to manage that can have access to it all.
That's nice and quick, Mark.
That's quick.
And 8 seconds, I think. So there's the account. And so what we can do is we can go into the account and we can do two things. The first thing is a capacity pool, which is minimum 4 terabytes. Maximum is 500 terabytes. So again, you just give this a name. So demo pool.
Can you quickly talk through the service levels there, Mark?
Yep, there's 3 different service levels. So standard, which is not so fast. Premium is in between, and Ultra is the super fast one. So the difference is a difference of QoS, so megabits per second, and then also your IOPS as well. So standard's got a low IOPS and throughput, bandwidth throughput. Premium sort of like your in between, sort of good for your most of the enterprise applications, and then Ultra is even faster again.
Okay, thank you.
So what we'll do, we'll go middle of the road in premium. 4 terabytes is the minimum, which is there by default for the capacity pool. Go OK, and that'll create the capacity pool, and that's done that already. And that's pretty much like a pool of where you can do your volumes.
So that's kind of like standing up a storage array in about 2 clicks.
Yeah, cool. Which is done in less than a couple of seconds. So volume is where you then add a volume within the capacity pool. And we can give this a name, demo vol 1, for example. And then you've got a size here. By default, it's 100 gig, which is the smallest, but that can go right up to 92 terabytes, I believe, or 100 terabytes or something like that, something crazy like that. So by default, it's stuck at the minimum. And if we go across to, actually down the bottom here first, virtual network. So with Azure NetApp Files, it has to sit within a subnet within a virtual network. And as you can see here, we haven't selected one. It's going to create a brand new virtual network here with that address space here. And then down the bottom here is a subnet which has got called default. And once we create that, it's going to be locked off and delegated directly to Azure NetApp Files. And the reason for that is because it's more of a injected, so the service injects into the VNet, into the subnet directly. So it exposes its private IP address so people can connect to it securely, privately in the virtual network. Yeah. Also to, like if you're using VPNs or ExpressRoute from on-prem, you can also connect from on-prem as well, if you wanted to. So that's the VNet part and the subnet part. This is nothing new. Most of our Azure services as well today normally get deployed into a subnet for security reasons. This is so for the fact that because people don't want to expose stuff to the outside world for security reasons. Next tab along is protocol. So let's talk about this for a second. So there's 2 protocols here that you can see. By default, it's NFS. So NFS is big with Linux. Today you can do it with Windows as well, not out of the box, so you need to install the client for NFS with Windows. NFS is currently at the moment is version 3.0, 3.1 I'm told, and version 4 is coming. The big difference between version 3 and version 4 with NFS is file locking in the enterprise world. So this is when you do your clusters with Linux, when you want to set up your Linux multi-session host, like if you're doing a multi-SAP environment, for example, and multi-node, what they need to do is they're part of a cluster, and there's a thing called fencing. There's terminology called fencing. If one of the nodes goes down, the agent on the VM will basically tell the fencing agent to block that off, part of the node, but that can take some time. SAP HANA doesn't like the whole non-locking capability, so version 4, when it comes out, SAP HANA will basically support that, and that's what it uses with the file locking capabilities. So just not to be confused, if you're running a single node SAP HANA environment, yes, you can use NFS version 3 or 4, and if you're doing multi-node, you can do version 4 only. SMB is the other one here. Now, you notice if I click on SMB though, it's asking me to select an Active Directory environment for permissions.
And that's an on-premise or an Azure AD?
That'll be on-premises. However, if we go NFS by itself, It doesn't use permissions like we see down the bottom here. It's got an export policy instead. So this is basically where you say, hey, I'm going to allow access from a certain number of clients. At the moment, it's open for everything, which is not so bad because it's injected into the subnet. So it's just basically, in other words, it's saying allow access from anything within the virtual network. You could put an NSG around the subnet in Azure, which is a network security group, and block off permissions. And if we do that, it's going to ask us to open up a few ports. So let's go through and create this. So that's not going to take too long.
So we're actually in the Azure Portal here, right? This is a first-party service from Microsoft.
Yeah. It's I wonder if I can see it here. There's, if you go to click on template here, resources. Yeah, you can see here. If I zoom in down the bottom here, whoa, that's huge. Okay, I won't zoom in, but basically, like this part here is what we call a resource provider.
Yeah.
And a resource provider is part of Azure Resource Manager. It's backed into the platform in Azure. So it's not like a third-party service. It's actually bolted in. So all of our services and resources understand Azure NetApp Files as what it is. And so this is why both NetApp and Microsoft have been working hard together to push this out, because for quite some time, and now it's like right there, part of it. That's why it's so quick to deploy.
That's great news.
Excellent. So basically you're saying that the appliances really from NetApp actually sit in the Microsoft data center. And that's how we can really have that guarantee and that performance that Azure NetApp Files provides.
Correct.
Excellent.
So while that's being created, let me go back to one I prepared earlier. I just wanted to show you the export part of it. So if I go to this one here, this is another NetApp account. And if I go to my volumes here, click on the volume here, which is NFS. And it's got down the bottom here, mount instructions. Yeah, so here it is here. So this is another volume I created earlier. And you'll see here it's got an internal IP address for the target. So that's the address you use to connect to NFS. And it gives you the command here that you can run. So either if you're using Red Hat Enterprise here, or if you're using Ubuntu, so they're different flavors. SUSE and Red Hat Enterprise are pretty much mostly the same. And Ubuntu or Debian are slightly different. They use sudo, and there's a command to run to install the NFS client, and then to map it is down the bottom here.
Very helpful. So you can basically just do a cut and paste into those to set up in login scripts or to share with your team and lots of stuff to get access.
And using Linux, it just maps it at the operating system level as a mount.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's jump through a couple of questions while that's spinning up. Is there any comments on licensing? Or how is it priced?
How is it priced? So the way the pricing works, it's published price is based on the performance tiers. Mark talked about the 3 different options there being standard, the premium and the ultra. It's actually priced per month per gigabyte. And these are in US dollars, thank you Mark. So it's 15 cents per gig per month for the standard, premium which is 30 cents, and 40 for the ultra or the highest performance. Of course, as a customer of Microsoft Azure, if you have an enterprise agreement in place, you'll actually pay for the price based on that enterprise agreement. These are the published prices, and of course in US dollars.
Awesome. And the other question is there a RESTful API, or I suppose other ways to automate the configuration, deployment, management of Azure NetApp Files?
Yes, there is. So the REST API is what we use in Azure, because as I said before, it's baked into the portal. So you can use any of your tools today that you use normally with Azure. With the REST API, you can use a handful of tools using VS Code. You can use PowerShell. You can use Azure CLI, a number, or you can use the portal directly.
Okay. And is there currently a way to change the service level of an existing capacity pool? Or how would I, if I want to
yes.
change that? Yeah.
So you have the ability, for example, if you've already spun up a storage pool and a volume for the standard, and you decide that the performance is not satisfactory, yes, you can actually go in real time. There's no sort of outage as such, there's no sort of downtime, and you can upgrade essentially to the higher premium or even the ultra performance if you wish.
Cool. Any best practices? Oh, this is a cool one. Any best practices around using volume managers such as LVM?
Yeah, so LVM is a Linux terminology, so that's Logical Volume Manager, and no, it's basically the same as any other type of connection with NFS generally. So if you're familiar with LVMs, you basically go through and set up the LVM part as you would normally. And then you basically have your mount, pick a folder, and then you can mount to the NFS share just like you would with any other normal NFS mounting that you do today.
Awesome. And to anybody who did join late, don't worry that this is being recorded and we will have this available for you to watch through in your own time. So please, Arun, can you take us through a bit more about Azure NetApp Files?
Sure, okay. So just to go through, so why the interest? Essentially, why did Microsoft turn to NetApp really to form this relationship? For a bit of background for those of you that aren't familiar with our relationship, Chris has already mentioned that Azure NetApp Files is a first-party product. So that means it's essentially a product owned by Microsoft. It's a service which is native to an Azure service that you'd be perhaps buying today if you're currently a consumer of Azure. And our relationship started about 2 years ago. We identified that with our expertise around storage systems and service file systems, there's a great opportunity with our expertise with potentially 25 years of history of doing that with our storage arrays. Microsoft said that we potentially have a good technology partnership opportunity here, and we've been working now collaboratively on building that partnership. About 65% of workloads today currently sit on-premise. By potentially now having the ability to offer Linux or NFS protocols as well as SMB allows us to move those workloads on-premise essentially into Microsoft Azure without the need to refactor those particular applications. So it's great for the ability to move customers across. If you're perhaps KPI'd as a storage administrator or a cloud solution architect and you're looking to move as many workloads over to perhaps a hyperscale like Microsoft Azure, we have the ability now that you can move those across without having to refactor. We've identified now that approximately 45% of the storage capacity is based in Azure is around storage, and the growth opportunity we're seeing in market in 2020, we're seeing about a 24% growth in compound annual growth, and by 2020 we're going to see about 40 exabytes of data around storage. So that presents a really good opportunity to work collaboratively with Microsoft, and which is why we've now formed this new partnership. Okay, keep going. So basically the storage hierarchy, just moving through the slides, just keep going there, Mark. So these slides, of course, will be shared, so don't worry too much about all of the details. But essentially the hierarchy works based on the subscription, and then we spin up the account, as Mark has already showed us on the demo. And then from there we spin up a capacity pool. Now Mark showed the ability to spin up that first capacity. We've gone for the minimum of 4 terabytes. You can also spin up more of those as you need to, and then from there you start spinning out the volumes that you need against that capacity. And that takes you down, and we've included there a lot of stats around quality of service and the ability to increase or decrease those volumes based on what you need. Keep going there, Mark.
We'll just skip over the.
So we touched on this before around the pricing. So I guess the question around that is, customers who we've talked about before had enterprise agreements, and no doubt they've got a bunch of Azure credits and things that may be sitting there. Can they utilise those to go against?
Yes, yeah, definitely, 100%. So as long as you've got an Azure subscription today, you can go ahead and use it. Obviously, there's a whitelisting process today, but that's fairly fast. Yeah. This is a performance pricing performance tier slide that we had up before. Do you want to go any more into that?
Sure. So essentially for workloads, standard will be ideal for sort of your more static work content, file share, and backing up database and things like that. The premium workload is really more for your Oracle database, perhaps your SAP file share, if also you're going perhaps for SAP on HANA, analytics workloads, if you're things like IoT, and for business applications. Where we see potentially the opportunity around Ultra is really around high performance computing, and that's that real high-end, really fast speed that you may need. But we think that the majority of the workloads that people will move into Azure for Azure NetApp Files will be based more on that premium tier, which is that middle tier level of performance. From a throughput perspective, you're looking at 64 megabytes per second per terabyte and 4,000 IOPS. So that will give you a comparable sort of performance against perhaps on-premise being sort of SSD type performance. And if you're happy with that kind of slower tier, if you're also more conscious around the cost, then that HDD type performance, and that will give you about a quarter of the performance you're going to get from the premium. So pretty exciting stuff.
So what I'll do just quickly is show you just on this more details. Just escape out of here. I've got an Excel spreadsheet to talk about the tiers in more detail. I thought I'd show this because it probably goes into more, gives you an example. And the way it's done up with Azure NetApp Files, here's your different tiers across the top, so standard, premium, ultra. It's all based on a block size of 16 kilobytes, right? Which is where it's measured at, and that's pretty much normal today. Based on the application that you're using, whether it's SAP, Oracle, whichever it is, can have different block sizes that they recommend for better performance and whatever else. But the way NetApp does it is all based on 16 kilobytes for the block size. So here on the left-hand side, you've got a volume size of terabytes. So 4 terabytes is the minimum. So if we go down to 4 terabytes, for example, and click off that, notice both bandwidth and IOPS is done on a per terabyte basis. So 4 terabytes in standard is 64, so it's 4 times 16, so 64 megabytes per second. And then you've got your IOPS here at a 16 kilobyte block size. And so again, that's 4 times 1000, so it's 4000. Now, here's where it gets interesting. So if we click in here and say our application is a 8K block size, watch what happens. It doubles the IOPS, right? That's also true if you use premium, obviously, same thing. If we go have an application that goes a smaller block size, it doubles the IOPS. However, if we go the other way, so 32, it will go slower, but you'll still have the same bandwidth. So that covers that off.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And is just a question as well around availability. Is Azure NetApp Files available in different regions?
Yes. As far as the region, we've got over 54 regions worldwide. In fact, that number's increased slightly, somewhat today. This is for Azure itself. And the way we do our regions, it's mostly, it's a mix of data centers. And so Azure NetApp Files today is not available in every single 54 region. However, if you go to the documentation page, docs.microsoft.com, and go to the Azure NetApp Files area, you'll find that easily. The list of regions changes on a daily basis, and likewise, the list of regions will change based on what's available for, say, SAP deployments and everything else. So you've got to like really, it's all provided on the docs page, both regions for NetApp Files, also SAP together. And once you've got the same regions, I mean, Australia East is one of the big ones. So Australia East, the answer is yes, it's available. Also Singapore, I believe, as well.
Singapore came on last week, yes. Australia East came on the beginning of July.
Okay, next slide.
All right, so priority workloads. So we're excited by Azure NetApp Files now, really about moving those Windows workloads we've mentioned before. It's more about that ultra fast performance that we've sort of covered off. The opportunity perhaps around Windows Server 2008 and SQL, potentially moving those workloads from on-prem into Microsoft Azure, and also SAP on Azure. So we've got NetWeaver now, Mark's already sort of covered off version 3.1. And once we've got version 4 coming through, which will be later this year, we're going to have the ability to do SAP for HANA with that high availability as well. And the other workload that we've identified through our partnership is also around that high performance computing, and that's really that infrastructure play as well. So pretty exciting there around those opportunities. Leveraging the ability to do things like artificial intelligence and IoT solutions as well, by moving those workloads out of the on-prem environment and moving those over into Microsoft Azure. So SAP, so just who's using it today? We have over 200 customers globally now using it. We've actually got a couple of mining companies in Western Australia who are already testing out the environment here in Australia, so we're pretty exciting there. We also have SAP who are already using it for the HEC, and they've got about 200 terabytes already live globally across 30 subscriptions. We've got some really strong case studies around Nestle, Nike, Mentor Graphics, of course, we've also got on the slide there. And really, while we're working with those customers, when we've done sort of bake-offs around the performance of perhaps Azure Files versus Azure NetApp Files, moving into those performance workloads we've identified on those bake-offs, we actually outperform and provide best performance overall in those on-premise environments. So we're happy to let customers test that, test it for yourself to see how good that performance actually is, and then from there you can see potentially the other workloads that you want to move across then into Azure.
That's excellent. So I guess, you know, the format of this typically is around geeking out. So what we'd really love to dive into a bit more detail.
A bit more about the product and how it works.
But a bit about the architecture as well. So Mark, do you mind sharing that info with us, please?
Yeah,
what does
sure.
This look like for you?
So let me just go through this, pick up the slide here. So here's another, architecture. So this is, we touched on this before and talked about how Azure NetApp Files does what's called service injection of the resource in Azure directly into the subnet, into the VNet, virtual network within Azure itself. So it's all private address ranges, and as you can see here on the screen, you've got the, let me just highlight these. So you've got the subnets here in Azure. There's another dedicated subnet here. So these, actually, let me just drop this off. So this bit down the bottom here that is circled is what's called this delegated subnet. So once you deploy Azure NetApp Files into a subnet, then that locks off that subnet just to NetApp Files. So there's in the docs page, there's a sizing sort of guide as to how many addresses that you want available within this subnet. But then once you deploy that, then that is available to every other resource inside of the virtual network. So this is normally how you would deploy like applications within Azure. You would have different subnets in the same virtual network. So you've got up the top here, you've got a management subnet where you can have some resources. Then you've got other subnets here like a hub and a gateway on this side. And this is your classic like topology, your hub and spoke topologies and stuff like that. So there's nothing new, and this all is what we've sort of been recommending for quite some time, is to break it up by subnet within the same virtual network. And then on the left-hand side here there's a VPN gateway, and we've got our secure connection to on-prem. So that means your on-prem services can access, get access to Azure NetApp Files as well.
Excellent, very good. I'm sure we'll probably get a couple of questions around that. So in relation to the resiliency and all that sort of thing, we've talked about it being available in a couple of zones and so forth. So let's dive into that in a little bit more detail if we can.
Yep. So talking about zones, actually just with next slide here. So resiliency. So the way it works is with resiliency in Azure today, the two big ones is availability sets down the bottom here. Hang on, let me go back. Okay, so availability sets down the bottom here, as you can see, and then availability zones. So let's just focus on them for a sec. So availability sets, what that is when you create a virtual machine, minimum 2 or more, you stick them into an availability set, and that just means within the region, then those two VMs are not going to be in the same rack. They're going to be in separate racks, so it mitigates the fault domain. So if something happens to one of our hosts, for example, then you've got 2 VMs in the availability set. One of them is going to be up, guaranteed, if something happens to a host. And things happen. It doesn't always happen, but things can happen. So that's an availability set. And notice I said within a region. I'll come back to that in a sec. Availability zones is slightly different. Availability zones is 2 or more workloads across zones. So you'd have like a workload in one data center and another workload at another data center. And then basically that's your resilience in that respect. So you can see the difference in the SLAs, VM SLAs within the same region. Availability set is 99.95 and versus 99.99 for availability zones. Now the things you've got to think about is the way we do our regions. And there's a small sort of a diagram here. You can think of this as a region, classic region. Each of those little boxes are data centers. And our regions comprise of any number of data centers. So 54 regions globally, over 100 data centers globally as well. So each region will have some of them up to say 6 data centers, for example. Now, the thing you've got to think about is all those data centers are not going to be just next door to each other. They could be like a few kilometers apart or even maybe 50 kilometers apart, maybe more. And there's this thing called latency. And especially in the enterprise world with SAP and Oracle, you don't want high latency between your workloads. And so you've got to think about how you're going to sort of overcome this challenge when you want to deploy your applications within Azure, is where you put your workloads so you don't have any latency issues. And so there's a new term that's coming out. I haven't got this on the screen, but it's called proximity placement groups. So what that is, proximity placement groups, is in public preview today. And what that means is because we are growing so fast, it's basically a guarantee that all of your workloads will sit within a proximity placement group, which is basically one area of a data center, which means latency is not a thing anymore. You don't have to worry about latency because it all sits together into one. What it also means in a couple of months or a few months, I'm told, is Azure NetApp Files will also support proximity placement groups, which means then you can go ahead and deploy Azure NetApp Files, set up NFS in a proximity placement group, have your application workloads, your back-tier, mid-tier database workloads in the same proximity placement group, and then together you're going to have like super, super, super low latency.
Wow, that's fantastic. So that's a few months, all fingers across, all sort of things.
I'm told a few months. Yeah, things happen fast in the cloud.
They do. So that's going to cut down a lot of headaches of having to architect where things need to be placed. If we can,
for sure,
automate that to a degree, that'll be very helpful.
Definitely.
So agreed. I saw you kind of skip over one of the slides, and I noticed one of the use cases we have is around SAP. So do you mind just covering off this sort of high 8?
Yes, SAP is arguably one of the biggest applications we have today globally. And a lot of enterprise companies today use this application for various workloads and purposes, and they have a number of applications. SAP is known for large machines, right? Large VMs and high performance. A lot of it runs within memory, so high memory machines. And so when it comes to architecting, say, an SAP application, for example, within Azure and using Azure NetApp Files, this is what it looks like here. And this is a mix of both HA and DR. And so if I do a circle here, you've got HA on the left-hand side here. And so that's within the region 1. And then you've got on the right-hand side here, the region 2, which is your sort of DR. So you've got a synchronous replication here and asynchronous. Now, just on this, there's 2 types of replication. So this is showing SAP replication between the 2 data centers. And then you've also got asynchronous to the second region. The other option that you have is Cloud Sync. So like any application, when it comes to replication and DR, which one's the best one to use, right? You've got Cloud Sync. You've also got, as an option, if you're using other workloads within Windows, we have a product called Azure Site Recovery, which also does replication as well. Yep. But you've also got application replication. So SQL's not immune to this. SQL's got its own replication engine. So does Oracle as well. So the question is which one to use. Now, generally the rule of thumb is if the application has its own replication engine for DR, use it, because it knows the application, it understands it, all the intricacies of it and everything else. It understands it quite well. If anything else, if it doesn't have a replication engine and you want to fall back to something else, use the storage, and that's where Cloud Sync comes in with NetApp.
Yep. Okay. And so from the DR side of things, you're looking at also services such as Cloud Volumes ONTAP, which again runs on Azure to help out in that side of things as well.
Yeah, it's also available through the Azure Portal.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. All right. Very good. Anything else on the architecture front that you want to cover off, Mark?
Let me have a look at this. Architecture behind the veil. So here's another quick slide of what it looks like. So we showed the slide before of the architecture, sort of what you see on the portal. Mm-hmm. So the capacity pools and the volumes and things like that. But then down the bottom here, under the covers, there's a bare metal fleet of NetApp filers, I guess. Maybe Phoebe, did you want to, calling you on the spot here, did you want to sort of talk about the back end technologies here for the NetApp part of it?
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I guess just aside from the fact that, it's running on NetApp enterprise grade hardware that's been servicing customers for over 25 years. And so, you get the resiliency of something that's kind of been engineered to run high performance workloads for a very long time at very high performance. Yeah, and you can see, we have multiple nodes for, within, a region or within a data center. Obviously, there's a lot of resiliency there too.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. So did you want to have a look at some demos?
Absolutely.
Or go through questions? Questions?
Demos are good.
Are there more questions online? Or
yeah, while you flip over to your demo, I guess there was a question about, can Azure File Sync also be used to migrate from on-premises to Azure NetApp Files?
Good question. Azure NetApp, so Azure File Sync basically will do it at the replication level. So if you're using your disks, I don't think you can, but we'll have to come back. I don't think so. Not at this point.
Okay, we'll get back to you. And I guess there's a couple of questions here about features that are available, which I think you're about to walk into. So I'm going to let you show that in the demo. And I guess the other question, actually, you showed Cloud Volumes ONTAP, and I wanted to ask Chris about this, since you have solution engineers who have worked with Cloud Volumes ONTAP in Azure before. I guess how do you see the difference between Cloud Volumes ONTAP and Azure NetApp Files? They're both Azure services from the marketplace and available through Azure. What are your team seeing, and what are you seeing?
So I think in general, it's really around the performance that you need and the workloads that you're looking at. So we have a number of customers who really like to maintain the control over the provisioning of the volumes and all that sort of thing, where they have a lower level control of that. And so Cloud Volumes ONTAP really allows the storage administrators to maintain that sort of level of control over the sizing and the partitioning, all that sort of thing. As opposed to Azure NetApp Files, it's a lot less from an admin perspective to actually provision that. As you saw, it was provisioned within seconds to get that up and running, with only needing to find what performance you wanted and the size of the volume that you wanted. So two core things: the level of administration that you want to have over your storage infrastructure, as well as the performance tiers, is what we're seeing in the field today.
And just to add to Chris's point, also by going with the native product within Azure, which is Azure NetApp Files, it's a really good opportunity to draw down on the enterprise agreement that you've negotiated as a customer of Microsoft, and potentially by going with the ONTAP solution, that's a different pricing model, and maybe something you need to establish with NetApp as well.
So do you guys want to see what it looks like from Windows and Linux?
Yeah,
sure.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay, so one I prepared earlier. So here's Windows. Let me just log into my Linux machine using Ubuntu for this, and
I love that the
enable
Microsoft
ADP.
guy is running Linux. It's great.
Thank you for that.
One big
hang
team
on.
now, Mark.
Yeah, we love Linux and we love NetApp. Okay, so here we go. Here's my Linux machine. It's super, super small, and if this tool is going to work, yes, it will. Okay, so we can see. Actually, let me just escape out. Let me go into the file system. This is the GUI version of Linux. I'll show you what it looks like behind the scenes through the SSH.
When you know the Linux community, they've got fingers to be able to use the keyboard, not a UI.
In fact, I think I read recently that in Microsoft Azure, there's more Linux workloads now than Windows Server.
Yeah, there is. It's like over 60% or something
Yeah.
crazy like that. Okay, this is like really, really tiny. I'm finding it hard to see. So what we'll do is make it easier. If we go into my part on the right, and let me just bring this across. Trying to navigate two different screens here. So if I bring this across, go to, so this makes it super, super easy. So if you go down to the resource group where your workloads are and pick your VM, NetApp Linux, and go to connect. So this is new, SSH, public IP address. Normally you wouldn't expose this externally, but for testing purposes only, yes, that's fine. Normally you go internal only for security purposes. Okay, good old PowerShell. We can go like this, enter, put in the password, and we are in. And then if I can get my command correctly, so to list all of the disks on this machine, it'll be that. And as you can see down the bottom is our volume for Azure NetApp Files, which is mounted to, let me zoom in. Okay, that's not going to work. Okay, so down the bottom here, you've got the volume for Azure NetApp Files, which is an internal IP address, 10.1.3.4. And yeah, that's going to the other subnet. So that's what it looks like within Linux. And then you can do whatever you want with that. So on top of that. Now, as far as Windows is concerned, and by the way, to get that to work, you have to install or to activate the Linux NFS client. Here's our Windows machine. So both the Windows machine and the Linux machine are running on the same virtual network. I might actually show you that just quickly. So where it's sitting. Okay, close out of this. Okay, so here's my virtual network, what it looks like. Go to subnets. Okay, here's the NetApp Files subnet I was talking about before. So when you deploy Azure NetApp Files in the volume into a subnet, it's delegated to there, which means it locks it off to that only. And I've got up to 250 addresses here that I can use. However, in here, in default, I've got my other machines. And I can actually show that in here, connected devices. So there's my Linux machine and there's my Windows machine. So they're both sitting within the default subnet. Right? And because they're part of the same virtual network, by default, the subnet that these are in can get to the other subnet nicely. And you can lock this off, by the way. So this is just out of the box. You can put network security groups in here. Yeah. You can put UDRs and whatever else you like without your networking, and you can do more security around this if you like. Okay, so back to my Windows machine. So for Windows, what it looks like is this. So I've got my share here, and I've set up the client for NFS. So if you go to Control Panel, Programs and Features, and add the feature in for client for NFS, it takes you 2 seconds to install it. There's no reboot required, and you can just double click in here and go straight in, and you've got access to files if you need to use it. So this is a bit of a demo. Now, what I will do while I'm in here is show you a tool that I use, and this is one that we use commonly with Microsoft, is to do testing for IOPS. So the way this works here is it's a disk speed utility. Here it's got 64K, which is the block size, and down the bottom it's 16. So if you remember before, we talked about with the different tiers, everything's based on a 16K block size, which is this one down the bottom here. And then if we run that, actually let's run that first, based on a 128 meg file, this shouldn't take too long. Probably take about 10 seconds. And if we go to the download section, where it's going to end up, we'll be able to see what it looks like. So it's running, it's a 4 terabyte volume. So if we go back to the PC, so yeah, so this is, sorry, it's 100 terabytes of space. And while we're waiting, I'll go to my calculator, which is on the other screen. So I'll just bring this across. Here it is here. Okay, so 100 terabytes of space. So you'll see here it's IOPS, change that to 16. And you'll see here, oh no, that's 16, let's go back to 16. Okay, so that's 400,000 IOPS. And we go back to Windows here. Has this finished yet? Yes, it has. Okay, beautiful. So go to downloads and this one here. Okay, and we're seeing the same, 409. So that basically matches up. So this is quite simple. It's a simple test, Windows, and you can do it on Linux. And if we did this other test here, which is, if we bring this up here.
Mark, I'm going to have to sorry to interrupt you because we are out of time, but I was really enjoying that. So I would say if you're on this call and you want to see the other demo, please do reach out to your local Microsoft or your NetApp team, and we'd be more than happy to show you. We do have resources, so if you could just pull up that last slide, just so that we can get that into the recording. We do have resources on the Microsoft and the NetApp cloud site, so you can go and have a look at those URLs that are going to pop up in a moment. Thank you, and we will we'll also be at Microsoft Ignite in November, which is November the 4th to 8th in Florida. We'll also be at the NetApp Insight Conference, which is October 28th to 30. So if you do want to see what's new in the time, then please do come along to those 2 amazing events. And thank you so much to our guests today. Thank you, Arun and Mark, for a really, really interesting. I was really caught up in that demo. And if you have any other questions, I'm sorry we didn't get around to them, but we will get back to you via email. And please, come to the next Geek Out. We look forward to seeing you. Thank you again to Chris as well for hosting in the Sydney office. Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Phoebe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.